Welcome to the Workology Podcast, a podcast for the disruptive workplace leader. Join host Jessica Miller-Merrill, founder of Workology.com, as she sits down and gets to the bottom of trends, tools, and case studies for the business leader, HR, and recruiting professional who is tired of the status quo. Now here's Jessica with this episode of Workology.
Welcome to the Workology podcast, sponsored by Workplace Masters and our new 12-week new manager training program. In 2018, the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics found that companies with fewer than 100 employees gave only 12 minutes manager training every 6 months. Organizations with 100 to 500 employees provided just 6 minutes. That's 6 meager minutes of training for managers. This is from HR Professionals Magazine. According to a Gallup State of the American Manager, Analytics and Advice for Leaders, 50% of employees have left jobs to get away from their manager at some point in their careers. I have left jobs because of really bad managers. I've interviewed for jobs on vacation when I was in Mexico because I had a jerk of a boss. Additionally, only 35% of U.S. managers are engaged in their jobs, and managers who are not engaged or who are actively disengaged cost the U.S. economy $319 billion to $398 billion. That's billion with a B annually. This is more than just a costly problem. It's an epidemic that just gets more complicated when you put the whole remote, hybrid, virtual workplace into the mix. I am so pleased to have Ramona Shaw with us on the podcast today to talk about our new manager training program. Ramona is a certified professional leadership coach and facilitator. Her mission is to develop confident, high-performing leaders and teams people love to work for. Through coaching and training, she helps new and mid-level managers establish leadership behaviors, skills, and habits to reach new levels of productivity and impact in their roles. Ramona, welcome to the Workology podcast.
Jessica, thanks so much. So great to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. Your career began in finance with a global private equity firm. How did your degree and experience in the financial space lead you to working with new managers as a coach and facilitator?
Yeah, so I had a very personal experience through the work in the private equity space that then sort of triggered my deep dive into leadership development. It was fairly early on in my career that I was given the responsibility and the opportunity to start building up a team. And at that point, I never had any prior leadership experience in a professional context, but I've been doing pretty well throughout my university degrees, my early jobs, and in that organization too. I felt like I was on a good track, and I thought, I'll be fine. I'll figure this out as we go, and it'll all work out. Well, little did I know how much changes once you are in an official leadership role. That transition, now in retrospect, I realize, and I often say that this transition from an IC, an individual contributor, to a manager is actually, in most cases, the biggest career transition people go through. And it was very much for me. I realized in the first couple of years, me being in this new role, leading a team of my former peers, a lot of them older than me, and we were hiring a bunch of new people and setting up processes, and it was fast growth and a very intense and fast-paced work environment. And in that process, I kept just pushing forward. I'm a bit of a driver. I want to get stuff done and achieve our goals and execute on things fast. And I completely ignored the fact that not everyone was driven by the same things, and not everyone had the same perspective or the same ways and preferences of how they worked. And I ran into conflict situations. I think I caused demotivation for certain people on my team. We were struggling at times with our relationships and the trust. And while on the outside, like, our performance of the team was actually kept up and we were all delivering on time and it seemed like we're doing okay. But I noticed, like, we're not in a healthy place in our team. We weren't really doing well. And I was often feeling stressed out. I was doubting myself after the fact, after having said something or having done something. And at some point, I was sharing this with a friend of mine, and then she recommended that I would look into leadership coaching and I would hire a coach. And that was when I was really for the first time introduced to the whole, even the idea of, oh, when you become a new manager, this requires a new skill set. And just like in any other area of life, like learning how to swim, learning how to ski, you be fair or well advised to go look for an instructor or a coach or someone who helps you train that new skill. I felt that for the 2 years that I was struggling, I was trying to figure this out on my own, but not having the tools that I needed in order to do it well, not understanding best practices, but figuring everything out through trial and error. And through that personal experience of working with a leadership coach and then getting really fascinated with leadership development and training and all these different concepts and frameworks and best practices, to then see this is the benefit of doing it. And so really personally experiencing that before and after, and then realizing how much and realizing how beneficial this investment was and continued to be for the rest of my career in that organization and beyond. And that's what really got me hooked. So it was this personal experience, stepping into a new manager role and then building from there and starting to unofficially first and then more officially coach other new managers and helping them go through this transition until I then decided to make this my career.
I love this. I feel like what you're providing the for managers, new and experienced managers, it's kind of like the cheat codes to the video game in a way, right? Like I'm going to date myself, but I feel like those Civilization ones where I can get unlimited pizza. You're giving them the cheat codes to the game so they don't have to spend all the time and effort making all the mistakes, or they buy the book with kind of, tips and tricks sort of thing, but you can get up to speed quickly, figure out what's best for you as a leader and best practices or what is best for your team. Because as a leader, I think hopefully most of us have realized this by now, but it's really not about you at all. It's about your team and what works best for them. You're the one who should be flexing and molding and shifting to suit the larger organism that is your group of team members.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those mistakes like that we make through the trial and error, they can be really costly. And when, we're thinking about some of the statistics of the number of people leaving not the job, but the manager and so forth, is because sometimes it is, we're building trust. And then there's one thing that a manager says or does that completely erodes the trust. And that can be then so hard to rebuild in a team. And it can really jeopardize the loyalty of that employee. It can cause them to be disengaged as a result of that, or just demotivate them. And on the other side, with that cheat sheet, right, that you mentioned, you're able to really tap into what humans are driven by and what creates those strong relationships and provide the support that causes people to feel engaged and wanting to work in that team and being motivated to deliver great work.
I want to take a step back for a minute. And I mentioned at the beginning the statistics, which I think are a little bit scary when you think of how many people leave their jobs because of their managers, the potential turnover right now in the pandemic with people seeing the end of the tunnel and saying, oh my gosh, I hate my job. I hate the work environment. The number of people who were prepared this year to leave, these numbers are high. But I want to step away from that for a minute and talk about HR professionals, HR professionals who want to be managers or step into leadership and management roles and grow in their careers. I wanted to ask you, what do you believe we should be thinking about first with regards to our own professional development?
There are 4 suggestions that I would make for someone who's looking or thinking about their own professional development. The first one is that any professional development is actually about your career, and it is not just connected to the job that you're performing right now. And I'm saying this because sometimes we are looking to the organization to deliver us with the training and the opportunities to grow and learn things, when in fact, in a time like this where we're switching jobs every 3 to 5 years or so, and not staying with one organization for the entirety of our career, for us to take our own career in our own hands and not to wait for someone to deliver a training on the silver platter is really, really important. So if you feel I need a mentor, I need leadership training, I need to learn this one specific skill, go out there, find the people, find the resources, find the programs, invest in yourself, because what you'll learn, especially early on as a leader, those things will benefit you and serve you for the rest of your career, way beyond probably that current organization that you're with. The second one is that habits are forming early on. So whenever you're exposed to a new environment or a new set of responsibilities, now that we're talking about leadership and new managers, for new managers who are exposed to this idea of leading and what does leading really look like and who am I as a leader, to be aware that in those early months, maybe years, a lot of new habits will form and new perspectives will shape. And being really intentional, what is it that I want to take on and have and cultivate, and what is it that I do not want to take on? And I'm saying this in a context of, having a lot of managers in organizations who may have never had any leadership training, and some of them might be micromanagers, and some of them might be really sort of loud and or critical towards people, or very goal driven and not compassionate in their leadership approach. Look for what resonates with you and what you want to cultivate, and leave the rest to the side. So even if you're managed by someone who has a certain style, stand up for yourself, hone your own leadership style that feels good to you and isn't just one that's picked up by those that you interact with most. The third one would be to recognize that what got you here won't get you there, like Marshall Goldsmith says. And most of us are familiar with this sentence, but this is especially true for new managers who are stepping into this completely new reality where they're now leading a team. And it's a lot more, like you said earlier, about the success of the team members and a lot less about their own success. And so it does require this complete shift, and to look for all the opportunities where maybe you're still sort of going back to a mindset or to habits that helped you in the past that may actually hold you back in your new role. And then the last one would be to seek out the uncomfortable. Look for opportunities to stretch and to learn, even if it's a tough lesson to learn. But you'll try something on, it may feel uncomfortable, but you'll come out as a stronger, more resilient, and more experienced person. And those little stretch moments then could be really small, like one difficult conversation or one exposure to a client or an executive that you didn't have before. It could also be big stretch assignments, projects, training programs, and so forth. But look for those opportunities to grow.
I love that. And they're all things that anybody can do. Like, it's not like you said, hey, you need to invest $45,000 and go to a year of school. I didn't hear that at all. Or you need an Ivy League degree to be able to make this happen.
Totally.
You need to be accountable and recognize your awarenesses, come up with a plan, and then get uncomfortable. I love it. And I feel like those of us who have been managers and certainly entrepreneurs, I feel like that is my whole life. As an entrepreneur, I'm uncomfortable all the time, but it means that I am growing and stretching.
Yeah, absolutely.
The past year has put a lot of pressure on HR and also on new managers in particular. I wanted to ask you, because I think a lot of us maybe weren't familiar with working fully remotely, certainly not having their entire team be remote. And it requires a different skill set than managing someone live in IRL. Can you talk about the differences in skill sets between remote versus in person?
Yeah, so this has been a really interesting year. And I think that when we're looking at the leadership fundamentals, right? So how leaders get to motivate people and keep them engaged and hold people accountable, or generate or foster this accountability, that is vastly the same. But there are definitely a few things to keep in mind when you're leading a remote team, because they need special attention and some intentionality, I'd say. One of them is your communication, and that comes in different ways. To be really clear and concise when writing. Another important part of this communication aspect is that you have to communicate frequently, right? Let people know about status updates, checking in with people, communicating the decisions that have been made and decisions have not been made, in order to provide a level of certainty and clarity. Because what really is often frustrating for people or creates stress for employees is if they don't know what's going on. And in a remote environment, we don't see other people. We're not picking up on this other stuff that we would usually pick up in an office. And so communicating frequently and communicating clearly is really important. And then another part is that I think gets a lot of managers into trouble is that because so much more is in writing and communication flows forth and back, and people can't just see whether or not you're at the desk and you're available, or if you're in a meeting, they simply have a question and there is this natural desire or urge to send a Slack message or any other collaboration tool to message them or to send an email. And as a manager, because you're trying to be really helpful and be there for people and not create a bottleneck for others, a lot of people get into this mode of just answering to other people's requests or to their questions all day long. But what happens in this case, they're being really helpful to the team, but it comes with two side effects. On one hand, they're not protecting their own productive time, meaning that now they're constantly reacting to what's going on the team and with other people, but they are losing this time of the day that they need in order to move their big initiatives or maybe strategic projects forward. And instead, they're constantly involved in the fires and in other people's problems throughout the day. So setting clear boundaries and being clear, when are you available and when are you not available, and communicating that with the team is a suggestion that I have. The second side effect that it has is that because it's so quick to message each other forth and back, that your team members may start expecting you to respond. And so when they're struggling and when they have a problem, that the instant and the first reaction they have is like, oh, I'm going to ask my boss because that's the easiest. My boss knows. And it's also the safest option because if I do what my boss suggests, I'm definitely going to be on good terms, right? But that then puts the manager into this, again, back into this reactive mode. So making sure that you're also trusting the team, that they can own the problem, but they can also be resourceful and figure out their solutions. And sometimes just encouraging to figure this out or try a little bit longer, or to look for their own options and solutions and ask a question back versus trying to jump in and help out all the time, because that can burn out new managers really quickly.
Protecting your time is so important. And it's something that I have been doing more and more. My team can work without me there. They don't need me all the time. And frankly, they probably like it a whole lot more because they have the autonomy to make decisions and do it the way that they would like to, and in the style and time frame that they would like to have it done. I want to talk a little bit about mental health, because this is something that I think now we're on kind of maybe the back end of the pandemic. Gosh, I hope we are. That the reality is setting in for us, or maybe we're having the realization that, wow, my life was really full of stress and anxiety. And hopefully we have some self-awareness about these things. Not everybody does have self-awareness about their mental health. And I wanted to ask you about how managers can help with that when it comes to ensuring that their teams, their employees in their teams, are thinking and considering and making time for their mental health.
Yeah, I love that you bring this up, because it's such an important question, right? Because without our mental health, even our emotional health, but without that, it's hard to cope with the challenges and with stress at work, and that also doesn't just allow us to really thrive in a workplace, which is what we're all hoping to create and do for ourselves, but also for our team members. I think one of them is role modeling for sure. If you don't make time yourself to take care of your own mental health, and maybe even normalize needing help from others or looking for resources or practices to help with how you're personally doing, then that sends a message to others that it's either not safe to ask or not safe to share or not even okay to really need it. And sometimes people then protect themselves, or they would not really step in and look for the support that they need, or not set those personal boundaries because they feel like it's not accepted on the team. So being vocal about it and letting people know that this is something that you truly encourage, that is important on the team, and then demonstrating this yourself with your own actions. And that might be setting really clear boundaries and sticking to them. If you say, listen, I'm going to not work over the weekends, don't send emails over the weekends. Or if you encourage people to turn off their computer in the evening at a certain time, make sure you not respond. You make sure that you do the same as well, so people can see how you're role modeling it for their benefit, but obviously also for your own benefit. And then another suggestion that I think is important here, and goes back to that safe space, is to really, really ask, how are you doing? Because oftentimes we ask, how are you doing? And we give a quick response that just whatever it is in the moment, but we never really create that time or the space to truly check in. I had a manager once who always say, how are you doing? And then, how are you really doing? And then pause. And I knew that, you know, there is time now, and this is a safe space to share, how am I really doing? And then that allowed us to also maybe pivot a little bit on my priorities, or that manager, for example, challenged me in some of my thinking. For example, I thought, well, I've got meetings all days, and this person challenged me, well, which of those meetings can you do walking meetings? When can you go outside? When can you build in a break? How can you take care of yourself in the process? And so, as a manager, just really ask, listen closely, and then help your team members and challenge them in their thinking to make sure that there is room and that they create the space needed and the time needed to take care of their mental health.
I like that. How are you really doing? Because it's
Mhm.
true. Like, I mean, sometimes I ask my best friend like that. Like, is anybody listening? Like, what's really going on?
Yeah.
And then you get the real scoop. So, and it also sends a message to that person that you don't want to hear the bull, the sugar coated. Like, just tell me the real stuff. And it
Mhm.
builds that trust that you were talking about earlier, which is so important as a manager. Let's take a reset. This is Jessica Miller Merrill, and you are listening to the Workology podcast, sponsored by WorkplaceMasters.com's new manager training program, a 12-week new manager training program in partnership with my guest today, Ramona Shaw, and me, Jessica of Workology. Let's get back to Ramona. Another area that I wanted to make sure that we talked about is you work a lot with new managers. You are coaching and training and helping them stretch and grow and gain those must-have tools that they need to be successful in their roles and for their teams to be successful. So, as you are working with new managers, what do you find is the most commonly overlooked skill that you feel like maybe managers really need, but isn't being offered by organizations in terms of training or professional development?
I think that the companies who do invest in leadership development, especially for new managers, they often cover the coaching skills, and they cover giving feedback and difficult conversations. I think there are two things that I think are often overlooked. One of them is to understand and appreciate people's differences, which also means that to understand that there's not one leadership style, but that you have to flex your style. For those listening who have kids, they know that each child needs a bit of different parenting. And it's very similar in a leadership role, where you realize that each employee needs a bit of a different approach in order to get the most out of them, the best out of them. They have their own preferences, they have their own styles. So, how can I adapt my communication or my interactions and the way that I motivate them to their preference? And that will make leaders sort of move from mediocre to great, because now they're not showing up in one way considering their style, but they're flexing their style. And this comes and starts with not only building self-awareness of what are your preferences and what's your style, but then really, really diving deeper into how are different people showing up, and how do I recognize their preferences and understand what motivates and drives them, and then how do I flex my style to better meet them and where they're at. And I think this is a little bit less tangible maybe than a feedback framework, and just say, like, here's the feedback framework, you do this, this, and then this. But that is that ability to flex your leadership style is something that's so important. And it's, again, something that once you figure that out and you have this awareness, this will serve you for the rest of your career. And it goes beyond just helping you lead your team, but also helping you manage sideways and upwards with other stakeholders.
I bet if there's any new managers listening, they know exactly what you mean when you say managing sideways, but it's not something as an individual contributor you ever thought that you would be doing. But every day, upwards, sideways, backwards, I don't know, cartwheel managing, there's a whole list of things.
Yeah. There's actually a second thing that I think is often overlooked. And this is not a skill. That is not a skill, but I'd love to add this too. And this is a bit more around the mindset, this idea that we develop self-responsibility. Because when you come from a place as a leader of taking responsibility for your own emotions and how you feel, but also for circumstances and how you're interpreting those circumstances, it takes away this feeling like a victim or feeling like being at the effect of, like the effect of how the company does certain things, or the leadership team, how they're asking for certain things, or your manager and your manager style. But instead, it puts all the power back to you as a leader, because you're taking responsibility for all the things that you can control, including the interpretations that you have or assumptions that you make. And then from this place of power and self-responsibility, there's so much more confidence that comes from it in terms of your own self-confidence, but also confidence that other people have in you. It often leads to being more calm in stressful situations, more solution focused, because there's no more blaming going on. And that mindset shift, when people go through this tremendous amount of maturity that others can observe the way that person behaves and interacts and shows up at work.
You know, Ramona, you and I are partnering together, and we have launched a new manager training program that's 12 weeks. And because of that, I'm so excited about it, by the way. And I wanted to take a moment for us to dive into, in your own words, what the training experience is like for new managers who go through this 12-week program.
Yeah, I'm super thrilled to partner with you on this, because I think we are complementing our skills and our experience so well to deliver this amazing journey for new managers to go through. The experience in itself is that their new managers go through 3 phases. That first phase is all about gaining clarity and building self-awareness. We're calling this the setting the stage phase. And once this self-awareness is built, the clarity is there on responsibility and your own style and your preferences, that is building such a rock solid foundation to then move into phase 2, which is about building and strengthening the manager toolkit. So we're going to talk about giving feedback, coaching, having difficult conversations, resolving conflict, motivating employees, and so forth. And then with that sort of toolkit that these managers have then developed, we're moving into the third phase, which is called leveling up. And in that third phase, we're going to expand on the things that they've learned and include things such as executive presence, meeting management, influence and persuasion, just to name some of those topics, but to help them really expand their visibility and their impact beyond just their immediate team, and leverage the skills that they've learned throughout the process and their strength in different ways to increase not only the confidence that they have in the organization and in themselves, to increase the impact they have in the organization.
Talk to me and listeners about how the training and the coaching is delivered. How's this happening, and what does it look like?
The goal of the program is to help managers build competence, confidence, and accountability. And the way that we do this is through a blended approach. So we're using training on demand training lessons that the new managers can watch on demand each week. We're including resources and toolkits, including self-assessments and templates, to help them apply everything that they learn. So the faster that they apply what they learn, the better the results. And then we're amplifying all this with weekly coaching calls. And through this personalized support in those group coaching calls, we're really helping new managers absorb the information and help them take action as a result of it, but also clarify how all this matters in their situation, how it can work in their situation. Because oftentimes what's lacking in like a workshop setting or on-demand video classes, for example, is that the concepts are all great, but then the audience, the managers are left with, okay, so now how does this work in my situation? Like my team is slightly different, my boss is slightly different. And this is what we're solving through the personalized support and guidance with the coaching calls, so that new managers can meet with us and talk through these specific scenarios, and we can help them make it all work for their teams. We're also doing this through our Slack channel, so that I get ad hoc support whenever something urgent pops up. I do this all the time throughout the day when I support clients who go through, and I give them little suggestions or a moment to reflect on what's currently happening for them. And that personalized support and guidance is, I think, would really, really create an impactful experience for new managers to go through.
I love it. They can ask questions that are directly relating to what they're experiencing or what's happening in their teams in real time. And you just don't get that when you go to a 3-day manager training program at some, destination. Like that continuous learning and real time doesn't happen the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
We know that people tend to leave their managers, not just companies. Without giving away all our secrets for the new manager training program, how do we train our new managers so that they build solid relationships with their teams?
Yeah, I think that there's like the behavioral part, right? It's what do they actually do? How do they actually communicate? How do they give feedback? And how do they coach? And how do they hold one-on-one meetings that are effective and don't seem like time wasters? There's all these how-tos and best practices. But I think what really makes us unique is we're not just talking about the how-tos, we're really also developing that leader's mindset, including what I talked about earlier, the responsibility, the commitment, the accountability, and to be able to reflect and reframe on their own so that they can show up in any challenge that they have, in any situation, in an empowered and confident way. And I think this combination of sort of this work on the leader's mindset combined with the actual skill set and the best practices is what makes it unique.
How are HR leaders typically involved in a formal new manager training program like ours? I mean, how are they involved? I mean, obviously they're not on the Slack channel or attending the training unless they're the one who is going through the new manager training, but what's their involvement?
Yeah, they often obviously want to check in and see how people are progressing or people attending. What are some of the insights that might come out? And I think oftentimes there's like high level, there's themes that are being discussed that seem to come up, and that is helpful for them to be aware of so that they can see where do they need more support or where's there other areas that are require their attention. And that's happening through alignment calls. So we would sit every month and have a 30-minute check-in call, and so I can have a bit of an update in terms of where are people in the program, what are broader themes, not the details, but themes that are being discussed and that might come up. So they not only can rest assured that the people are leveraging the program and are applying what they learn, but they also get some information back that is important for their work.
I love that. And I love that you have the monthly calls with the managers, HR leaders, so that they can stay up to speed, but they're not in their business, because we need people to be able to learn and grow and develop on their own time in a way that works for them.
Yeah. And plus, HR leaders are wearing many, many hats, right? So if we can make their job easier and lighten their load, I think, it's a win-win.
And that's what we're trying to do. If you love this and you're like, oh my gosh, this sounds great, I love what Ramona is talking about, and I want to learn more, the place to go to learn more about our 12-week new manager training program is www.workplacemasters.com. So www.workplacemasters.com. So a whole bunch of resources there. We have a brochure. You can set up a call, an appointment to talk more about it, and then we'll get you in, we'll get your managers going, and the training training is a 12-week program. New managers come in once a month into the program, and then it continues weekly, like what Ramona was talking about. So where can people go, Ramona, to connect more with you? I know you're on LinkedIn. Do you have a website also too they can go to be able to connect?
Yes, my website is ramonashaw.com. One word. That's where people can learn more about my work in general, or I love to connect on LinkedIn. I'm fairly active on there too. And otherwise, I'd love to chat with you if you go to workplacemasters.com and you set up a call, whether you are an HR manager or an individual, to see if this program is the right fit for you.
Thank you for Ramona for joining us today and sharing her expertise. I will link in the show notes to Ramona's LinkedIn so you can connect with her there. And certainly you can go to workplacemasters.com to read more about the 12-week new manager training program, as well as Ramona's bio to dive into the details so you can get started. That's workplacemasters.com. Thank you so much, Ramona.
Thank you, Jessica.
It's really important for HR leaders to create resources and support for new managers, especially around leadership, empathy, people management, communication, productivity, and more. Manager training is critical, and that's why Workology is launching our first ever new manager training program. It is 12 weeks of training for that new manager who has less than 3 years of work experience as a manager. We have weekly coaching, we have training, we have support, and an opportunity to work with experts like Ramona in a one-on-one and group training setting. You can learn more by signing up or get the details at workplacemasters.com. Thank you to Ramona for taking the time to share with us her insights today about new manager training, how to get started, and what HR managers need to know about helping to elevate their new managers, not just now, but setting them up for future success 5, 10, 15, or 20 years down the line. Thank you for joining the Workology podcast, sponsored by the New Manager Training Program through Workplace Masters by Workology. You can go to workplacemasters.com to learn all about our 12-week New Manager Training Program. This podcast is for the disruptive workplace leader who's tired of the status quo. My name is Jessica Miller-Merrill. Until next time, visit workology.com to listen to all our previous podcast episodes.